Adam Lewis here, and in this episode of the Deer IQ podcast, we talk shed hunting, the myths versus the facts. How can you use finding sheds and the information you gain to actually catch up to mature bucks the next year? There's some myth to that. There's also some actual things you can use. We talked to a 25-year expert in this area who's found hundreds of sheds. We look at how private is different than public, the strategies there. We look at when you should exactly and how you know exactly when to go in to find and look for those sheds. We talk about some actual glasses you can use to help you see and find more sheds, and how our guest uses sheds and finding them as part of his success formula to get on and take more mature bucks every year. All that and more in this episode of the Deer IQ podcast.
Welcome to Deer IQ. Here to help you hunt smarter, elevate your approach, and consistently tag exceptional whitetail. Whether you're just starting out or a longtime hunter targeting mature bucks, this is your edge. We bring you proven tactics, expert insights, and unfiltered conversations with high-level hunters who just get it done. Guiding you through it all is veteran hunter and strategist Adam Lewis, helping you spot what others miss, fine-tune your focus, and unlock your full hunting potential. So let's raise your deer IQ. Here's your host, Adam Lewis.
All right, I'm here with Ty Easley of Heartland Bowhunter, and Ty's been on the podcast before. We're going to talk about shed hunting. It's that time of year. Maybe you've already done it. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you're really into it. Maybe you aren't. But we're going to get some tips. We're going to look at some maybe myths of shed hunting, and we're just going to see how Ty does it, because he does it pretty well. I'm not a huge shed hunter. I'm more of a scouter, and maybe I find sheds, but I'm more into scouting. But Ty, welcome back, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always great to catch up and talk about whitetails. Always love doing that for sure. And like you said, shed hunting's been something I've been doing since we were talking a little bit earlier. Since 2001 is when I kind of started and got big into it. I'd say probably about 4 or 5 years after that. Okay. And pretty heavy into it ever since, and just kind of another piece of arsenal that I try to use to learn more about the deer I'm going after, or just to learn more about deer in general. So
yeah, we were just talking, and I did some scouting this weekend with a guy. Happened to find a shed. This is on public land, and Ty, he asked me, well, was it any good? And it literally, I put it in my backpack in the side pouch, and the side pouch happened to have a hole in the bottom like this, and it's gone. So it was about the size of a pencil, basically. So that's my big find here. But more and more people are getting into it, right? You just said that.
Yeah, as a shed hunter, it's unfortunate, because I remember the days, or the years I would go out and find, 60, 70, 80 sheds, in a year. Wow. And now, I mean, I probably walk at least I don't know about twice as much, but definitely more than what I used to, and maybe find half that. So it's and it all depends on where you're at. And, I also try to split a lot of time up between shed hunting and, I get a lot more into food plotting now. So obviously I'm doing a little more of that. So it does take away from it a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot more people that are into shed hunting now. I think social media has obviously promoted a lot of it, with all the different platforms that they have, people sharing. And so it's fun. It's exciting. It's a great way to get out and get exercise and to learn the property and not worry too much about disturbing too many deer, because it's not, season's forever away. So.
And you're just saying about going into somebody's home that wasn't even a hunter, right? They were.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just kind of goes to show. So I work for AT&T full time. Been doing that for like 25 years. But I was just in a house the other day, kind of a business residential house, and I went in and was getting their internet and everything hooked up. And of course I noticed big sheds on the mantle and around the TV and stuff. And I asked the lady that was there. I was like, "Oh, is your husband a deer hunter?" And she's like, "No, he just really mushroom hunts, and he just got into shed hunting a couple of years ago." So, that's kind of the way it's going. I mean, I see a lot of people out there that you can tell right away they're not deer hunters, And I think it's just almost taken up, what are those games that people used to go, or Pokemon, or where
Oh,
they would
yeah.
go and search for something. I almost think that's kind of where
Hmm.
shed hunting has gone. And another kind of unfortunate thing, I know a lot of people are into buying and selling antlers, which, I got no
Oh,
problem
yeah.
with that. But it seems like a lot of people are out there just to make a little money, to go find antlers and then turn around and sell them, which, I don't know, to me, I guess they're a little more, there's a little more to it than that. I hold them a little more dear to my heart. And uh, especially when you start getting years of history with the same deer, that's kind of, the exciting part for me, is to find and to see how the deer change from year to year, getting to hold that antler. Just the whole thought of the deer carrying that, growing it, carrying those antlers on their head for, months, and then you're picking up something that just come off of a deer that, you've got a connection with a little bit. So it
Right.
almost makes you a little more of a connection with them.
Yeah, a lot more competition, a lot of reasons to do it, obviously, but
Yeah.
we're hunters, right? So
Yeah.
let's start here. So you've been doing it a long time. You're in Missouri. Is
Hmm.
that, I'm guessing that's where you do most of it,
Pretty
right?
much. I a little bit in Kansas, but pretty much around here. I mean, I only have so much time, with working full time, on weekends and afternoons. And just now this week, we just hit the daylight savings. So now
Yeah.
I finally got a little more time. By the time I get home, it's more than, I got a couple hours to go. So I can go 20, 30 minutes away and still get in there. Uh, but it's there's the time is the hardest thing to find to do it, but that's why I don't get to travel, to do it. I'd love to go to a few different states and shed hunt, but in the same breath, it gets me more intimate with the properties I have. Obviously, I kind of like most shed hunters. I'm sure most, it's no secret now, everybody kind of starts on public grounds, as soon as end of season hits, because you never know when they're going to drop. Now this year we've had pretty warm winter, a very mild winter, other than a few little cold snaps, and really not a whole lot of snow. And when we did have snow, it was melted within days. So that's to me, I've noticed it seems to have made the deer hold a little bit tighter on my properties. Obviously, they, you know, not having any problems with finding food and stuff, and it's less stress on the whitetails,
Yeah.
which I'm hoping will in turn, make them be a little bit
Hmm.
better starting growth this year, and maybe even get a little bit bigger this year. That's the hopes, as long as we don't run into any really dry spells or anything. So
Right. So what are your strategies? Let's talk tips, where, when, how you find them, how to find
yeah,
more. I mean, you're giving away, I guess, uh,
yeah, and I
to
know.
the
I mean, it is.
competition here.
It's not really any. It's not. I don't feel as though it's a big secret. It's talked about so much.
Right.
Obviously, we all have our own, little thought processes on where we go, where we're gonna, search. Uh, I mean, like most people, if you can avoid the bedding areas, it's kind of like deer hunting. A lot of it is a little bit. I like to try to let the cameras on the farms that I have sole permission on to hunt, dictate when I go in. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, if they haven't dropped the antlers yet, then why go in and
Right.
go run deer off your farm? And even if they're circling around, they might come, but still, you're pushing them into areas they're going to be harder to find. Um, so I run cameras all the way till deer drop their antlers, and then once the deer drops, then I usually hibernate a few and then move a few for turkey. But for the most part, I run cameras, all the way till about right now, right about March, is when I'll usually kind of hibernate some of my cameras. But I typically start on private or on public grounds, and I try to avoid the bedding areas, but it's hard because you're on public and everybody's walking everywhere. So you kind of just
Hmm.
it's a to me, on public ground, it's a lot more of right place, right time, because you have to know. I mean, you're kind of getting lucky. You're not running cameras on there, so you're kind of getting lucky on knowing when they drop. Now, if it's a deer I've had history with, then I typically, most deer I've noticed over the years on deer that I've had, 3, 4, 5, 6 sheds to, they'll typically drop within a week or two of the previous, every year within a week or two. I've had some deer that held on till the beginning of March every year, and I've had other deer that drop the beginning of January or the middle to the end of January every year. So once you get a little history, which is hard because you got to let the deer get to that age, obviously, you can get to learn a deer a little bit better and kind of know where they kind of like to winter at. Of course,
Yeah.
that's dependent upon food and any habitat potential changes. But for the most part, if you got a really good bedding area, you know, that's usually pretty keyed in on what I start at on public grounds. And then soon as I see the deer dropped, unless it's a deer that is just a special deer that dropped early, that I, must have the sheds to, then I may go into my private grounds to find them sooner. But for the most part, I wait usually till at least the middle of February, most time, almost the end of February, early March. It was later this year because they held on a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So starting with public, hitting a lot of bedding areas. Is there anywhere in public where you tend to find more or less? Is it just bedding?
Yeah, it's funny because you can go into what you would think would be a bedding area. I mean, I've got a couple properties, public grounds that are pretty close to me that I go on, and you could call it, I mean, it's like 60, 70 acre bedding area, so it's giant, but it's very interesting when you find those sheds in a particular place year after year. And I ain't going to share any, plot maps or any onyx and drop coordinates where all my sheds I've found. But it's amazing how you pull up a map and I can show a giant property and you can almost see a line of where you find your sheds in and out of bedding area and to the, fields they typically feed in. Now, every once in a while you'll find the stragglers here and there. And I think that's due to just pressure, people constantly in and out and chasing the deer. And that's another really good key. Pay attention to, I have dogs, so it's tough for me sometimes when I slip into a bedding area because I'm working, a dog or two. So they usually will bump deer. But if I'm by myself, sometimes I'll try to be a little quieter. So if I do bump a deer, I can see if it is still holding. And then I really try to pay attention to their escape routes because I'll really go, especially towards the end of shed season. I'll go in sometimes and just avoid the beddings where I know I've walked and everybody's walked, and I'll start running escape routes or edges where I know I see deer taking off to and using certain trails and getting out of areas. So, and start this is kind of towards the tail end, a little bit later part of shed season. I'll start walking spots that I just haven't even walked, that usually don't hold them as much, and sometimes find those sheds that are, that people just don't go in those areas. But food plots obviously are great. I mean, that's ideally if you got, sole access to a farm, I mean, and they haven't dropped yet, or a majority of them haven't. I mean, if you can go and do some non-intrusive, non-disturbed shed hunting by just driving fields out. And that's a great way to do it because you can see them a lot further away and you're not missing as many where you're in the woods. And if the conditions aren't right, if it's a sunny day and you're casting a lot of shadows, and, if it is that type of day, I usually try to walk with the sun in my back. So I'm looking, with the sun not in my eyes. That usually helps. And then obviously best days are rainy days, cloudy days, any days where you can, just see a little better. There's not as many shadows in the woods. And especially if you're on a ridge where there's a lot of leaves, you get that wetness that lays all the leaves down. So then you can see the sheds a lot easier. I mean, that's your ideal situations there, for shed hunt.
You mentioned on public escape routes and stuff. Do you find a lot on those routes? And do you think it's maybe because when deer are taking off like that, they're potentially losing them, or is that just where they're traveling a lot, so there's a higher odds they might be there?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's because, our deer just obviously take that route numerous times, out the back door of a bedding area. And it's funny, they will leave signs, obviously, you're a major guy that goes out and likes to really look for the sign and scout that way. So shed hunting is no different when it comes to that. If you pay attention to especially the deer, how they are. And it's funny because they'll run a lot of like edges. They'll run towards a creek and run right up the edge of the creek. Where most of the time when I'm shed hunting, I'm 30 yards off the creek, and or if you're up on a shelf, you're up on a trail, in the middle of the shelf. But when they're escaping, they may run right down a certain part of the ridge where it's easier, where it kind of plateaus off. So it definitely helps. But I do find a fair amount every year. I wouldn't say majority of them by no means, but you get into this later part of season where you have walked, bedding areas, fields. Though this is the time of year I do like to try to, hit those escape routes. And I also notice a lot of people south-facing slopes, especially the more harsh the winter is. You get a south-facing slope with some big red oaks that usually, uh, deer don't usually eat those acorn trees or acorns quite as fast as they will the white oaks. So you usually can find deer on south-facing slope with big red oak acorn trees. Uh, but I've also noticed that, like, if I've got a bedding area that's up high versus a bedding area that's like down low by a creek or river or something, I might find sheds in the lower areas, but I tend to find more sheds in higher bedding areas than I do in lower areas. I don't know if I can only assume that's because of elevation, and maybe it's a few degrees warmer up
Yeah.
here, than it is down in those low lying areas. But, I tend to work those a little bit more. Uh, but I mean, miles for piles. That old saying, you really just got to walk and don't go too fast. I mean, I have a tendency to run through an area looking for bigger sheds, but it really helps if you slow down and really are looking back on each side constantly. Those are big keys. I can't tell you how many times I've walked past a shed and then looked back and see sheds. I'm like, gosh, I walked right past that. If I wouldn't have glanced back over my shoulder,
Yeah.
I would have never saw it. So I'm constantly trying to do that, and just take your time, and it's fun. I mean, it's a great way to exercise. Great for me. Great to pray, to get closer to the Lord. I mean, just out there in creation. It's just, for me, it's a lot of fun. It's passion.
So start maybe the obvious spots, like you're saying, like food plots, things like that are easier.
Yeah.
Work your way to the other spots. Now, if you have dogs versus just you, so if it's just me, I'm thinking I walk a certain grid. Do you like grid it like every 50 yards or something?
Yeah, if it's just me walking, I usually try to go. My dad goes out with me a lot. He loves to get out and walk. My son, my daughter, they'll go with me some. But more often than not, it's me by myself. And even when I go with my dad, a lot of times I'm like, all right, I'm not going to, we walk at two different paces here. So you go that way, I'll go this way. And I'll you walk this ridge, and I'll go walk this ridge, and we'll usually meet up. But typically, if it's an area that I know, if it's private ground that I know there's going to be sheds that I know a deer's already dropped, then I'm gridding it, because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything, or hopefully not miss anything. With that said, I've had pictures of a deer drop, come back within 2-hour window. So he came from the west, dropped, left to the west, come back, and this is the reason that they're doing this is because I usually put alfalfa and corn out that time of year. As soon as season ends, I'm dropping a big half hay bale of alfalfa, mixing corn all up in it. So they're usually coming to that, right? Coming to and from the bedding area. And we had a deer one year that, in a pretty decent shed. I've actually had 5 sheds to this buck. But yeah, talk about hard. We had 4 guys that were on the side of this ridge. And I knew this deer dropped within 300 yards for sure on this ridge before it went down to the bottoms. And it was this deer was super homebodied deer. And we walked that ridge the 3rd time with all 4 of us before we found it. And it was a little bit of a rock bluff, and he had walked up the edge of this rock and dropped it right like in some bushes that were right on the edge of this big rock on the bottom side of it. And we walked by that thing twice before my dad finally, on the 3rd time, got within about 3 yards of it before he saw it. And I was just 10 yards on the other side of the rock, and I had done walk past it again. So they're even a solid shed, they can be very difficult to see.
Yeah, I guess so. Um, Binoculars, do you use those?
I always have them on me, especially in fields. Obviously, if you're walking a bedding area, thicket, not as
Right.
much of a need. But I almost always carry my Vortex on me. My I usually carry 12 by 50s on me, kind of like same thing I use for turkey season.
Okay.
Not so much what I use in the deer stand, but the 12 by 50s I can reach out there a little further,
Yeah.
especially may save me a 300-yard walk across the bean field. Uh, so yeah, I usually, but that's a really cool thing to do is to get out in a bean field or a short hay field and run glass across it and spot one through a set of binoculars. That's pretty exciting moment to do that. When you glass one up for sure.
I saw somebody on social media. I think he was on. I had him on here before, Cody, who shot a big buck out in Iowa this
Uh
past
huh.
year. But he posted something about glasses. He had some sort of sunglasses that were filtering a certain wavelength out that
Hmm.
made them pop out a little bit more.
Yeah, actually it's funny. Mike Hunsucker, who I went
Hmm.
shed open with, he had a buck. It's kind of an interesting story on that one, real quick too. But he had a buck that dropped. Well, he was assuming it dropped. He had pictures of him pretty like regular, and he had some standing beans on this farm. And all of a sudden, he didn't have any pictures for about 4 or 5 days, and he had a pretty good sized body deer that didn't have either side. So he was like, I don't know if it's him because you know it looked like he didn't have one side to confirm and then lose the next side the next day. They were just both gone, and I'm like, well, maybe that's a good sign. Maybe when we find one, we'll find the other if he dropped on you. So we go out there and we got out there that day, and he was like, hey, I got you a pair of these new glasses, and we've been talking about them. They're actually, these set anyways were made more for mushroom hunters, but
Okay.
they're really they're basically a really cool. I say cool, not like cool like you look cool, but
Hmm.
cool is in like they make everything really blue
Yeah.
looking.
Right.
So they make your whites pop out a little bit better and just give a little bit better. To me, on a cloudy day, I didn't notice a big difference, and it was for me it was tough. I almost had to. I need my glasses because I have a
Oh
little bit
yeah.
of astigmatism in my right eye at a distance. It's blurry, so I tried to wear them just without my glasses, and then I got to where I had to be like the old man and just put them over my glasses, and then they were falling. So it
The
didn't work so
wrap
great for
arounds.
me. Yeah, but if I could get a set that were prescription, I would probably wear them all the time, and I
Yeah.
might do that. I might talk to him about doing that. That would be pretty cool. But they definitely made a difference. I mean, you can see a little bit of difference. Do they give you a major edge? I don't know about that. Maybe a little bit more on sunny days than a cloudy, rainy
Hmm.
day. But I am going to try them a little bit during mushroom season too, and see how they do during mushroom season. But they basically cool everything down. It's not so many, like warm colors. It cools everything down and makes kind of the white stand out a little bit more.
Gotcha. That's kind of
But
cool.
but it was cool that day. Going back real quick, I'll share this. We talked about escape routes and deer shed, right? Um, so he hadn't had a picture of that buck with sides on for like 3 or 4 days. So we went in, we start looking, and I actually had the dogs with me, but we were being somewhat quiet. And he was walking up the ridge. I was kind of about 3/4 the way down the ridge, so maybe he bumped him to me. I don't know, but anyways, he had a group of probably about 4 or 5 deer come through, and one of them had a big right side on, and it was I mean a good right side, big 4 point side. And I'd filmed Mike on this buck a couple times, so I'd gotten pictures. I kind of knew him. I'm like, I can't say 100% sure. He didn't have his left side, but his right side looked a lot like him. And I'm pretty quick at judging deer and knowing what's a big deer if it could be him. And I'm like, I think it was him. Of course, Mike's like, man, I'd be surprised if it was him because I haven't had a picture of him 3 or 4 days on the standing beans, and he was pretty regular. And I'm like, well, I get it, but who knows? So we go up, we get about, I'd say 150 yards, and he finds a big right side shed up on top of the hill. He'd walked up on it, and then I worked the dogs, and they ended up finding it. But he saw it, so we pick it up, and it was, it wasn't like bloody, but it was. You could tell it was fresh.
Hmm.
Whether or not he just had dropped that, I don't know. But it was dropped in we get a lot of the, I don't know if you guys get this up in Michigan, but like bush honeysuckle, it's really invasive around here.
Yeah.
That whole side of that ridge was covered with it. The deer usually don't go running through that as much, just because it is so thick and woolly. But we found it. He found it, diving and diving in there right on the top of the ridge. Now, was it him? I can't say for sure, 100%. But he thought it was maybe another big 8-pointer that I had seen, that he hadn't seen on the sandy beans for a bit. But then just a week ago, which was like 3 weeks after, he got a picture with that deer with both sides on. So he questions. He's like, man, that would be way too, coincidental. And I'm like, well, yeah, to me it would be not. I mean, I've done it before where I've jumped a buck and not seen him drop, but found his sheds and know it was a deer, 100% sure that it was a deer I just jumped. So I truly think that deer jumped up and got 100, 150, 200 yards out, dropped that right side while he was, using an escape route. And, we walked right up on it and found it. So.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if they're running, hitting stuff. There's a better chance the side might fall off there.
Yeah, especially if he's already dropped one side. It's pretty rare. I say it's pretty rare instances where I have a deer drop.
Every hunter has blind spots and weaknesses holding them back. What are yours? The Deer IQ Test 360 is our complete hunting strategy and skills assessment, designed to uncover the holes in your approach, fix them fast, and refocus your efforts on exactly what gets results. It's quick, insightful, and delivers personalized suggestions based on your unique hunter profile. If you want to consistently tag better whitetail, the Deer IQ Test 360 is where to start. Take it now, linked below or at deeriq.com.
And this episode is brought to you by our very own Deer IQ land management system. If your land is not meeting its full potential, or you're tired of seeing the neighbors shoot the bucks you're after, we can help you fix that. We measure your habitat and your hunting strategy and come up with a science-backed plan for you to grow, hold, and harvest mature bucks on your land consistently. We have a few slots left for this year, so fill out the form below or contact me through Instagram or at deeriq.com to set up your free discovery call today.
It's pretty rare. I say it's pretty rare instances where I have a deer drop any more than a week apart. Now, I've had a lot of deer do that, don't get me wrong. I had one this year drop a left side in the middle of December and didn't drop his right side till almost the end of February.
Wow.
So that was a long time. Now, his left pedicle was kind of messed up. So I don't know if that was, maybe he got in a fight, maybe it was damaged, whatever. Maybe that was the cause of him. And he dropped it about a month and a half early last year. But this year it was like almost 2.5 months apart, which is pretty crazy to see him drop that far apart. So
yeah, I was going to ask you, like, how, once you find one, how close do you usually find the next one?
Man, it is so hit and miss.
Is it?
And it's not even, I used to think, okay, well, it's deer to deer, right? One deer, if he's that type of deer that he's going to drop both the same side or drop them both at the same time, he'll do that year after year. And it's not like that. I mean, I've found enough sheds over the years now where one year, a buck I called TB2, I killed years ago as a 6-year-old. I found his 4-year-old sheds. Actually, they're right here. I found his 4-year-old sheds. Just a stellar 4-year-old. I mean, I thought this was going to be the first booner, like true booner I'd have, right? Well, the next year, and these sheds were probably about 40 yards apart, 30, 40 yards apart. One was in the edge of the timber where he come out, and then the other one was right out in some in an edge of a bean field. And then the following year, we had a drought year here in Missouri, and he grew not nearly. All his tips were like breaking off, I guess, from fighting or whatever. But if you can see, I don't know if you can see in his tips, but they're kind of, it was almost like they didn't harden and stuff. Now, we had it was a major EHD A lot of deer died. We think we found 16, 17 deer on that farm dead.
Hmm.
And he actually disappeared on me from September till November. And crazy story, I actually shot him when he had these antlers on, hit him high. He lived. But those 2 months he died, that it was super dry out. And what I assume happened was we're by a river. So I assume he went down in the bottoms because it was so dry up top. And I assume he went down in the bottoms and because it was so dry up top that he probably was just summering when it was the hottest down there so he could be by the river. And I wonder if he didn't get EHD and just luckily and survived it. And then luckily the next year I ended up killing him. But yeah, he lost like from 4 years old to 5 years old. He probably lost 10, almost 15 inches of antler. And then luckily at 6, he gained it back. He never really did get the tine length that he had at 4, but he gained it back in mass and, ended up scoring about the same. But I know I kind of went on a tangent there. I can't even remember what your question was now.
No, I was just curious how far you found them apart sometimes.
Yeah.
If there was any.
Yeah, back to that
rule of
deer.
thumb.
He dropped those two about 40 yards apart. And the next year I'm thinking, okay, this was kind of way back in when maybe the first 6, 7, 8 years that I was into shed hunting, maybe 10 years, I don't know. But I didn't have as much history like I do now with individual deer. And so I kind of thought at that time, oh, he's going to drop them together again. And sure enough, the next year, I found one side. It was only like probably 30 yards from where I found the two the year before. But his other side was a good, probably quarter mile, maybe not quite a quarter mile, but it was a good, 600, 700 yards away from where he had dropped that one. So yeah, with that said, if I do find the set, usually they're within a 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 yard, area of it. I typically try, once I find it, I'll start making circles. Or if I got an idea, if it depends on if it's a field or woods, how it lays out. But if it's a thicket, I'll usually just start doing circles. And you just never know where that second one's sometimes going to be. I don't know if I shared with you when we've talked before, but I had a triple drop set of sheds on public that I found years ago. Big, just awesome deer. One of my, still to this day, my favorite find. And I'd had a black lab at that time, and she found the first side, and the other side was like 15, 20 yards, but it was on public ground, and it was on park public ground. One of the park people had trimmed a bunch of brush and stuff and had went over to the edge and thrown it into the woods right there and threw it right on top of that second shed. And so my dad, he came out there with me, and he's slower, more methodical, right? He found the second side like 15 yards, 20 yards from where the first one was at. And I walked by that thing at least probably 3, 4, 5 times. But he just thought it was just tucked under, and he was able to catch a tine, and, we pulled it out of the brush, and I was pretty tickled. To this day, that was still one of my favorite, shed memories and finds. So.
What are your thoughts? So you have dogs. Did you get those dogs specifically for shed hunting?
So my first one, I have a lot of people reach out to me about how to start a dog, what tips to do on shed antler dogs. And the first one's like anything, like any dog. First and foremost, you want control of your dog. I mean, you don't want to go out there and be hunting your dog instead of sheds the whole time. So obedience is number one always with any dog, no matter what you're training it for. You want to be able to have control of your dog. Secondly, so my first lab I bought, my black lab, her name was Whisper. She was the first one I worked over sheds. And I didn't start her until she was 5. I actually worked her on hand signals and kind of got her to duck and goose hunt. But at that time, I was kind of getting out of duck and goose hunting, and naturally kind of started shifting her into shed hunting. That shed hunting wasn't real big back then. It was and dogs weren't really, and they were used a little bit, but not nothing like they are now. But I worked with her, and she would have been a really good dog. I think she was a really good shed dog. She was just a really good searching and finding dog. She found that triple drop, another real big set of 10-point, 5-point sheds, and quite a few over the years. The next ones, the ones I've got now, I've got a silver lab named Faith, and her, I don't know why, I just thought the same process, right, that I worked with Whisper. I worked her on obedience, which she's great with, but then right away I started working her on hand signals. And I don't know why I should have never done that with her. Because now when we go out in the woods, she's constantly looking back, like waiting for me. I think she thinks I know where every shed's at. She's constantly waiting for me to tell her where to go. And she'll go work, but she works within 30 yards. And she very rarely. Now, if we're in a thicket, it's great because it could be just on the other side of a cedar tree. But when I'm in open timber, I want a dog that's going out. I don't even care if it disappears for, a minute or 2 or 5 minutes. If it comes back with a shed, but she's really good. I almost joke her, she's more like my dad. She's staying close. She's working close. But I mean, she's found a lot of sheds on her own, where I just look up and she's got a shed in her mouth, bringing it back. Now I've got a male dog. It's actually my daughter's. It's actually the firstborn to Faith. And him, I decided I was going to do it completely different. I didn't work on any hand signals. I just worked on, playing with him with fetching a little bit, obviously training, with, basic commands and making sure I had control over him. But after that, it was just getting him interested in the sheds and playing with them. And they got a real short attention span as far as, when they're younger. So you got to not try to overdo it. So you just got to take your time and let them show you when they're not interested anymore. But eventually, so he does great. His casting is phenomenal. He goes out and works, but I almost think he goes a little too fast sometimes. He's almost better towards the tail end of a hunt because he slows down, and then I feel like he's working. He's actually looking instead of just running. But I think he will be good. I mean, this is just his 3rd year, which I was a little I'm not lying. I was a little disappointed. I thought he would find a little more than he did this year on his own. And he does great. Like if I see a shed and work him and back off, he'll find it usually faster than my female will every time. But he's just not turning that corner on, like just disappearing, finding a shed and popping back up with a shed in his mouth. And to me, that's what I want. But they actually complement each other really well because she works right in front of me and then he works the outer perimeter. And, I'm usually looking kind of in between them when we're walking. So I just love the camaraderie of having a dog with me. And when I don't have him with me, I kind of feel, lonely, if you will. I feel like I'm missing a little more, but they're fun to train, fun to have around.
They're doing visual. Are they smelling anything at all too? Or
now I've seen them both turn on sheds before, so I know they'll smell, but I've also seen them go right over sheds that I know aren't too old. So I don't know. That's the hardest part about training a shed dog. They have wax and they have other scents that you can put on sheds, but the dog's got great nose. So if you're picking up a shed and touching it with your hands, I think, when you're going to set sheds and train them, they're smelling you 100%. I mean, there's just, and in fact, I had my Faith just the other day. Now, I don't know if she was just being, hard-headed or what, but I was walking through a thicket, and it was kind of a couple points to this story real quick. I was walking through a thicket, and I see her out about 20 yards, and of course I'm scanning, and I see her stop. So naturally, my eyes go to her, and she stopped, and she's kind of had her head down, and she looks up at me. And then she puts her head back down, and I see the base of the antler sticking up. And I'm like, of course, I don't want to say fetch it up because I want her to just naturally grab it and bring it to me. I don't want to have to tell her. So I immediately veer to the left, kind of watching her. And she's like looking at me like, hey, it's right here. You're going to come pick this up or what? And of course, again, I don't want to say anything to her because if I'm working them, I don't give them any praise until they have it in their mouth and they're bringing it to me. That's when I will praise them, just in case they ever do find one when I'm not there and they can't see me. I don't want them looking for me and not seeing me and going, okay, well, he didn't tell me to fetch it up, so I'm going to keep going. So I finally went to circle around her about 15, 20 yards to the east of her, and she finally picks it up. and brings it to me, and then I praise her. But I'm in the same breath, I'm like, why did you not just pick that up and bring it right to me? So every once in a while, even her, which she's done it a million, quite a few times, where she's brought me sheds that I never saw. I don't know why she didn't just do that one, just being stubborn or for whatever reason. So, but a very cool thing to that shed, I found a shed about 40 or 50 yards before that. That was a 1-year-old shed, last year's shed, and I didn't even realize it till I got home. I set those sheds side by side, and 100% sure it is the same deer. So another instance where that buck dropped
same area,
dropped the same side within a 50-yard area of a bedding area. So.
Interesting. So that this might kind of transition well into hunting strategy, right? So that kind of tells you where they like to winter, right? How much does this play into your in-season hunting scouting, and what have you found as far as how close they're actually at when they drop to where they might be able to be hunted in the fall?
Yeah, so that all, that I hate to disappoint everybody, but just because you find a shed right there, don't mean you're going to kill that deer right there. That's the I think a little bit of a misconception on finding sheds. Everybody, it's exciting that they're there, but that doesn't necessarily mean. I mean, I've had numerous occasions. So the properties I hunt around here, I got about 4 farms. One of them is set apart from the other 3. So the other 3 are about a mile away from each other, each one of them. So if you could do a triangle in between them, right? And they're all about a mile away from each other, roughly. You could almost say 4 farms, the way they spread out. And I've had, multiple occasions where I get deer where they like to winter on one farm, and then rut time they'll be on one of these 2 or 3 other farms that are a good mile away. And so I'll find more of my sheds on maybe 1 or 2 of those farms, really 2 of those farms, and the other 2 farms that are more in the low-lie areas, like I was talking earlier, they just don't seem to winter there quite as much unless food's involved, which one of them does have a big bean field on, which I do find a fair amount of sheds in there. But there are some ridges there that I don't have permission to be shed hunting on. So I think they're coming off those onto that bean field, coming on there. But with that said, again, it all goes back to, we've had this discussion, a home-bodied deer versus a deer that travels, versus a deer that he just does not have a small core area. He's just one of those bucks that, for whatever reason, just likes to be everywhere. And that is obviously the harder sheds to find. You get that deer that has a small core area, like Dreamer, like this buck. I've got all my bucks that I've got like 5, 6 sheds to. All were bucks that had super small core areas. The bucks that I get that travel from, 2 miles, from a farm to a farm, those are the ones that are obviously much more difficult to find the sheds to, and doesn't always, you're not always going to kill them where you find those sheds. Where these other ones I've had pretty good success, especially with Dreamer. I found his sheds probably a few hundred yards on each side of where I killed him in that food plot. Okay. He was just really in that area. So if it's a buck, and that's going to be cameras, if you got a deer that you get pictures of all year long and he's got a small core area, then you're going to have a much better chance of finding sheds of that deer and, potentially killing that deer maybe close to where you're finding a shed.
Yeah. So it's clues, to figure out their personality, buck personalities, kind of build a profile of that deer. Is it, I've talked about mobile versus sedentary bucks, all that. So it's a clue to like, okay, what type of buck is this? Does this tell me anything that can help me kill him in the fall or not? Right. Just one more thing, I guess, to kind of help you figure that out.
But it also, even the information that doesn't help you or that you don't think is helping you is somewhat helping you. Like I have
he's still alive if you find him, right?
Yeah. A, he's still alive, but B, I was leaning more on like like the deer I killed this year. The last year, it was real solid 8 point. He shows up on November 6th last year on the farm. No pictures, no summer, no October pictures, no nothing. Just peak of rut, he shows up. Stays there till the end of February till he sheds. Found one of his sheds. Don't know how I didn't find the other one. Thought I would have found it for sure, but didn't. This year, I wasn't sure if I assumed he was alive because I found his shed, but never got another picture of him. But it also made me, I'm holding out hope, right? Because I know this deer will show up probably later, So, I mean, I didn't know for sure. And it's not like I wasn't trying to hunt anything else, but I was holding out hope that he would show up, later on. So sometimes sheds can, or even a bigger factor, maybe you got a deer that's there. I've had a lot of deer that'll show up during the rut and then disappear, and before shed season hits. So I know I got to be on that deer. I've got maybe a 2, 3, 4 week window to hunt that deer before he's off back to where, wherever he lives at, 80, 75, 80% of his, time.
Yeah. Yeah. Give you an idea of the window at which you can actually hunt them or not, if they're still around or not. That's the tough part about public land, which I'm mostly public land up here. So it's like, well, how many of them actually made it through? That would help you though. So I guess if I did really intensive in certain areas, shed hunting, I might know if one made it through other than, trail camera stuff.
And then you get those, I kind of mentioned it earlier when we were talking, you get those where you find the sheds too, and you're super excited, thinking that deer is still in the area. You're going to hunt him next year, and then for whatever reason, he's gone. I had a big 8-point do that about, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Found sheds with him 2 years in a row. Finally got 5 years old. Where we're going to hunt him that next year. Have no idea whatever happened to that deer. So
you don't know if he deer or car collision, or you don't know.
Yeah, and he was a pretty local deer. So it was one of those deer. It wasn't like the one I killed this year where he just showed up in November. This deer was there pretty much year round. So it almost had to have been a car, EHD, something died somehow.
Yeah. Didn't I see this year that you found some deadheads too? Like that's another thing. You will find out if a deer didn't make it or not. You could potentially find a deadhead, and okay, that's what happened there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a sad thing to do, but at least I'd much rather know what happened to a deer versus having no clue. Like one of these bucks I got here, this deer we called Coke cans. It was kind of a cool deer. This was the first year we had pictures of him as a 3-year-old. He was nothing. I was like, he's kind of big bases. Yeah. But then as a 4-year-old, he got even bigger bases and really put it on. And then at 5, he had an eye get poked out. It was his right eye, and so his left side grew funky. You can kind of see, but he always kept that really cool points. All the trash by all the sticker points by his brows and stuff. But that is interesting. We talk about since we're talking about shed antlers, we talked about injuries. Obviously, that plays a huge role, and most people know now. If the deer gets an injury on his right side, there's a good chance the next year his left side might grow weird. Where vice versa, if it's injuries on his left, his right side might grow weird.
We were talking about they finding deadheads and knowing if they're dead or alive or not.
Oh yeah. So that deer, same thing. He, my daughter finally got a chance at him, and long story, but I won't get into that. But it didn't work out. And then the last picture I had of him was in October, and this is a deer that was so regular. I mean, it was one of those deer that every time I hunted, I felt like he was within 300 yards of me. If I was hunting that deer, I knew he was within 300 or 400 yards of me. But he disappeared in late October. Never saw him again. Never heard any surrounding hunters. I asked multiple people that hunted around the farms I have no idea where that deer went. Never found his dead head. So with that said, I'd rather close the book knowing
Yeah.
what happened than always wondering where that deer went to. But that happens a lot. There's no doubt. I have that happen.
Also, you don't want to waste time. If you think a deer is possibly still alive and he did
Mm,
die and you spent a whole fall like trying to hunt him, like, man, that's
yeah.
a lot of wasted time and effort there for
Oh,
sure.
well, the one this year was especially like that because in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I'm not waiting on this deer. Luckily, I had other deer to kind of hunt, and luckily, I
Hmm.
was filming my son and my daughter, and well, you know, so I had other things to do, but I was super excited once that deer showed up. But I didn't know. I mean, I who knows? He could have been, like I said, he could have been killed, could have not made it through the winter, could have died over the summer, VHD. There's just could have got hit by a train. I've had deer do that.
Oh, wow.
Before where I hunt a deer, pass him up, and find him dead on the railroad tracks 3 weeks later.
Huh.
So you just never know what is the outcome. There's just so many things that are out of our control, and I mean, it's just a testimony to the deer when they do make it to that, 5, 6 year old age. It's just crazy that they can ever even have a chance to make it that far or that long.
Yeah, there's so many things that could take them. Um, so what's maybe a story? You kind of shared some stories, but is there any like really good story? I know we've talked before about you have really good odds of finding these sheds and eventually shooting a deer. Is there anyone in particular where that's kind of a cool story of finding sheds, building history, and it kind of helping you take that deer?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Dreamer was probably the one the most, which we've shared this story a bunch. I
Hmm.
don't want to go too much, but there's been a few. Uh, we talked about food plots. There's just so many. It's never one thing. We always talk about this. It's all the little things that you have to pay attention to and try to
Right.
do right. If you're trying to hunt a specific buck, you really got to learn that deer, and every step of it along the way is important. Really can't overlook anything if you want to consistently get after those deer. Um, but I don't know. The Dreamer, obviously, I had, I think, one, two, three. I had 4 sheds to Dreamer. Um, there's been a couple bucks that I've had 5 sheds to. This one was really a pretty cool one. Not a giant deer. I've got one of the deer, I think, and it gives kind of a statement to this. So this deer, I had sheds to from. Of course, I put tags on these, so I am able to remember these. So this was 22, 23, and 24. So this kind of talks. This deer kind of is a good representation of everything we've talked about. So this is 22. So this is when he was 5, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so 5. He was 5 years old right here. Not a giant shed. Not really what you want a 5-year-old
Hmm.
to look like. And I wasn't even sure how big he was. Honestly, this year I always thought he was 4 when I had found this shed. So I kind of deemed him as 4 this year. Not much for brow tine. The following year was his best rack ever at 6. And this deer was a pretty homebody deer. I never really hunted him hard just because he wasn't a giant, and I always had some better deer to go after. Um, but didn't make a big jump. Got a little sticker point. He started traveling a little bit more at 6. I started getting him on more than one farm. About a mile away from there, he started traveling, especially during the rut, which is expected. And then, but at the end of this year, when I started putting the alfalfa and corn out, um, which I'd always found his sheds pretty close. I noticed he had a broken back left leg, and it was pretty nasty. I mean, it was like you could tell he was hurt. It wouldn't put any weight on it, but he was still super dominant. And then so the next year, I had a very difficult time recognizing this deer. I actually thought maybe he died because he had summered for the last, you know, since from 3, 4, 5. I mean, I had a picture of him year after year, and so he went from this on his right side. Remember, his left leg was injured to this.
Oh man.
So just a hook right here, right? So
Hmm.
I saw this, and you see a rack, and then on his left side, he went from this to this. So I mean, never was a big deer, but he dropped a
Right.
lot of inches
Mm-hmm.
and very unrecognizable, especially from just pictures, because his leg had pretty much healed, and he was starting to put weight on it. So until I was, the Reconics didn't have a feature yet at that time. I think they're actually coming out with it this year, where you can send the videos to your phone. So I'd have cameras out in the woods or out in this clover plot for months. And finally, you know, I went and pulled it in October, the card, just to switch out cards, and started going back and watching the videos. And I realized what deer he was, because he still had a limp. And then I saw his leg hurt, and I'm like,
okay. Yeah.
And I thought he had died. I honestly thought he had died from his leg being messed up, maybe coyotes or whatnot. But ended up realizing he was still alive. Of course, he was bottom of the list, even though he was, at the time, I thought he was 6. He was really 7 after we got his teeth age. And I know now. But so it was crazy, because the next year, so we didn't kill him. My dad had an opportunity to kill him at the end of the year. Crossbow malfunction. Didn't work out. So the next year, he actually grew back, which was kind of cool. So a lot of people ask me, oh, well, if he's got injured, he's never going to grow that side typical again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he did. He grew a perfect 8-point rack the next year. And again, the only way I knew is because his big old knotted up ball on his back left leg. And but he had a perfect 8-point frame. He was an 8-year-old, which I didn't know until we got him aged. I thought he was 7 when we killed him, but he ended up being 8. But yeah, he rebounded, not as big as he was at 5 or 6, but he did have a nice, you know, it was only like 115-inch 8-point, but 8 years old, and we knew did real saggy skin. It was a cool, and my dad, the one that killed him, and he got redemption from his year before, and so it was cool. But a lot of history with that one buck, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I have more sheds to him and don't realize it, just from when he was 2, 3, 4. But he just, an average 8-pointer around here, it's hard to distinguish them sometimes unless I've got that problem this year on a farm where I've got 3 different bucks that they're going to be very difficult to tell apart next year for sure, because they're all like, you know, 3, 4-year-olds, and they're all 115 to 125 inches. They're kind of very similar frames. So, but it's fun. That's the exciting part to me, to see what they turn into.
Yeah. Putting the pieces together, I'd say, if I could kind of wrap up our talk here and summarize it, it's fun putting the pieces together, you know, helps you learn maybe the territory, how they use it, their personality, and help you, you know, figure them out a little bit better. Every little bit helps, right? Anything else? If you could wrap it up.
No, I mean, not really with shed hunting. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, I hate to disappoint everybody, but like, it's definitely not, where you find sheds is not as nearly important as knowing the little details about that whitetail. I mean, every little bit helps, every piece of the puzzle helps, but that's a very small piece of the puzzle compared to what you learn with visual sightings, trail cameras. Those are way more important to me, especially trail cameras. I mean, because they're scouting for you all the time. And you can learn if a deer is in that area all the time, or if a deer is in that area for 2 months, 1 month out of the year, or if he's there once a week. I mean, you can really get an idea.
Right.
And obviously there's nothing more important than time spent in the woods, as you well know, scouting. But you don't always know, hey, what deer laid this trail down, or this rub down, or this scrape, which obviously scrape, you know, more deer are using it. But yeah, just don't get too hung up on, oh boy, I found these sheds here, I'm going to kill this deer next year, because you know, that deer might be a mile away from there, you know, next year, 2 miles away from there, you know, next year during hunting season. So yeah, that's probably my takeaway on shed hunting. As fun as it is, it's a pretty small piece to the puzzle, really. Yeah,
well, for sure. And it is, though, pretty cool, though, that you can have all these sets of sheds and potentially shoot that buck. It's just a cool story, cool history to have.
Oh, yeah. To me, it is, especially, you know, that's our show, the Heartland Bowhunters. That's what we're about, is building that story. I mean, that's the biggest part, obviously the videography work and trying to tell a story through the lens, but if you just go out and kill a deer that you don't know every year. I mean, there's just so much more to me, anyways, and I know to his own. But most viewers, I think, like that, seeing that a hunter going out there and spending that time and working hard to get that deer and to learn all that history about him, and to finally get that success. It don't always end like that, but it's a pretty awesome moment when that all comes together like that, and you're blessed with a Heartland.
For sure. Well, Ty, thanks for coming on and sharing. You have a lot more shed experience than me, and so appreciate it, man.
Yep, anytime, Adam. You take care, and hopefully you can get out there and go find another one that don't drop out of your backpack this time.
All right, and here are your high IQ takeaways and challenges. How can you use shed hunting and finding sheds as one more little piece of the puzzle, just a little bit, but something that'll help you get on, figure out a deer, and potentially take them the next year? If you're a private landowner, how can you improve your land to help you keep more bucks, find more sheds, and get more information on them with the cover and the food on your land? If you're a public land guy, how can you use shed hunting and scouting to help you figure out the pressure in the area and where it actually pushes deer? That can really help you out. Okay, and next time we finish up our series on deer by the data, looking at drones versus collared buck studies, which is more scientific and which can inform our decision making better when it comes to hunting whitetail deer. You won't want to miss that, and I'll see you then.